Today, I'd like to share a story that doesn't belong to me, but rather to my father, a former soldier in Mexico since the 1990s, who recently retired due to age and health issues. He went through many experiences in the military, especially during the most turbulent period in terms of security in Mexico, which occurred between 2006 and 2013. He describes these years as the worst, especially for those who experienced firsthand the clashes between the military and drug traffickers. Besides the terrible experiences he witnessed, my father reports that many of them were inexplicable, some even paranormal, at least that's what he believes. He can't find logical explanations for these events, like the story I'm about to tell. He spent most of his time on remote roads, between isolated mountains and areas far from civilization. One night, while patrolling a dangerous area on a road near the northern border of the country, he and his colleagues witnessed a disturbing event. They were traveling in 2 trucks, each with 8 soldiers. My father was in the back of one of them. They moved slowly, cautious as they searched for a criminal. They entered a dark and isolated area, surrounded by the silence of the night. The adrenaline was palpable, everyone was alert for a possible surprise attack. Suddenly, they heard screams of pain echoing through the darkness. Everyone turned, trying to locate the origin of the screams. Initially, they thought it was someone being tortured by criminals. The trucks were stopped, the lights turned off, and the soldiers silently got out, walking towards the desperate screams. As they approached an abandoned truck in the middle of nowhere, with flat tires and a nauseating odor, they were ordered to approach and investigate. Cautiously, they approached and circled the vehicle, prepared for any eventuality. However, the screams abruptly ceased. My father and his colleagues, armed with flashlights, examined the truck meticulously. In the bed, they found several bodies piled up, already in an advanced state of decomposition. They began to remove them, hoping to find someone alive, but they were all dead. There was no sign of life around the truck. Furthermore, they all heard the cries coming from the truck clearly, without any sensible or logical explanation. It was concluded that this had a paranormal nature. Considering the time the bodies had been there, in an isolated and deserted place, where few ventured beyond those involved in the terrible event, it would not be surprising that these souls wanted to be discovered. Well, that's my father's real story. He gave me permission to share it here. If you enjoyed it, leave your comments and soon I'll share another equally impactful story that he told me. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe if you're enjoying it. We continue. Hello everyone. I hope you're well. This was an experience I had during my time as a soldier. I consider it one of the most frightening paranormal experiences I've ever had, so I decided to share it with you. I can't provide exact details about the location, but many of you must already be familiar with the place where this happened. It happened in the mountains a few years ago when my platoon was sent on a mission to this remote area. The location was extremely isolated, atop the mountains, with the nearest villages hours away from our camp. We were ordered to watch the area to prevent illegal plantations or criminals' hideouts. We had information about a gang that used that region as a refuge. As we took turns on patrols, we left our truck in a secure location and proceeded on foot. It was midnight and the place was shrouded in the darkness of the night. The air was cold, typical of autumn in the high mountains. Navigating through the trees and branches was challenging, even with our navigation equipment. We had been walking for hours when, around 2 a.m., we heard heavy footsteps approaching rapidly. We were on high alert, prepared for a possible attack. We turned off our flashlights and waited in silence. The footsteps drew closer, accompanied by distressed crying. When the figure finally emerged from the darkness, we turned on our flashlights and found a barefoot young man, dressed in torn and dirty clothes, sobbing and pleading for help. We asked him to identify himself, but he never responded. I repeatedly asked what had happened and what his name was, but the young man kept crying and begging for help. Suspicious, we thought it could be a trap and decided to detain him for interrogation. However, as we approached, he ran off desperately. We all chased after him, even as he ran so far ahead that we could only see his silhouette. We continued the pursuit, unsure of how long we ran. One of our comrades tripped and hurt his leg, but he assured us he would be fine and instructed us to keep going. Finally, we reached a peculiar cave where the young man had headed. We entered cautiously, aware of the dangers we might encounter. The cave was mysteriously lit by candles, dispensing the use of our flashlights. We continued forward until we found a body lying on the ground, surrounded by macabre statues and lit candles. The environment was filled with written letters and strange objects, such as voodoo dolls and animal remains. The atmosphere was terribly oppressive, even for someone like me, who had witnessed many horrible situations. The energy of the place was heavy and sinister, something I had never felt before. We rushed to the body, and as we approached, we were hit by a nauseating smell. It was the same young man we had been chasing, but he had been lifeless for at least 3 days, with his eyes sewn shut in an X shape and tied up hands and feet. We immediately informed our superior via radio about the discovery, requesting the presence of experts. The scene was gruesome and disturbing, leaving us stunned and questioning what could have led to such a tragic outcome. A few minutes later, we received a call from him telling the experts not to approach that place, in fact, for no one to approach that place. So, we were tasked with carrying the body and taking it in the truck to the village where the only morgue was located. As we tried to drag him out, we realized something was holding him in place, preventing him from moving. It was something very strange, as if someone was pulling him by the extremities inside while we pulled him out. On one of those occasions, we agreed to pull with all the strength we had. We counted to 3 and, together, pulled him backward by the feet, but we felt something yanking us from our hands. One of my colleagues couldn't bear it and ran out of the cave without saying anything to us. It was just the 3 of us left inside, wondering what to do, because we knew we had to obey our commander's order, to get the body out of there and take it to the morgue. But we didn't even know what we were dealing with, which was quite scary, because you can't fight against something you can't see, something you know is completely evil and that you know your life is in danger from. We were thinking about what to do when suddenly a colleague started making noise. From there, as fast as I could, my other companion also started running after him, and of course, I also left with them, because I didn't want to stay alone inside that cave. We returned to our camp completely frightened, unable to properly explain to everyone else exactly what had happened to us. Many of them doubted us, but others believed because that place was very famous for the witchcraft practices that happened there. Another colleague told us that his grandmother was from that region and that many people went there to make offerings to death or the same in exchange for different things and their requests. Many offered human lives. Thus, he had the theory that the young man we found in that cave had been offered in exchange for some request, and that the young man, of course, could not rest. His soul was suffering greatly, and therefore, he was seeking help, trying to escape whatever kept him bound for the rest of his life. Throughout the night, I couldn't sleep thinking about it. My family is very religious, so I started praying for the soul of that poor young man. The order the next day was to return to that place and retrieve the body, but during the day, to make it easier for us. So we went back to that cave early in the morning. There were 10 soldiers in total, but when we entered, the body was no longer there. The place was permeated by an unbearable smell, but there was no trace of that body anywhere, inside or outside the cave. It was something that had to stay that way, with more questions than answers, as we couldn't do anything else. No matter how much we searched everywhere, we never saw the body of that young man again. So, I can't say for sure what happened to him, who or what took him. But to this day, I continue to pray for him every night, just as I do for my family, and I know I will continue to do so for the rest of my life, as it was something that marked me too much. And I reiterate that I've seen all sorts of gruesome things in my work as a soldier, but nothing has marked me as much as this case. Take care, because evil exists, and this is said by someone who has seen all kinds of unthinkable things before moving on to the next story. I would like to leave a like on this video just so I know if you're enjoying our content. Thank you very much. We continue. Good night, everyone. I'm going to tell an experience my father had when he was in the military. Every time he tells it, it's with a lot of fear, as he still lives with these memories today. Imagine experiencing inexplicable things in this line of work. I won't give my father's name for safety, but this happened in a mountain range in Mexico. He says they were sent, along with their platoon, to that mountain range. They had to set up there for a while because there were many illegal crops in the area. He says that at night, the place was completely silent and the cold was bone-chilling. but the darkness that set in when the sun went down was simply indescribable. They took turns standing guard at night. He and other colleagues had to stay awake from 2 a.m. until 5 a.m., when everyone had to wake up for roll call. He and his colleagues positioned themselves at different points to watch the area, and on one of those nights, something very strange happened. He says everyone was in their positions, watching the area and passing the time with no sound except for the insects inhabiting the area. The cold was more intense that night, and my father felt that something bad was going to happen. He thought they would be attacked by some criminal gang or something like that. He never imagined it would be something completely different. Suddenly, a colleague who was behind a tree, very close to where my father was, whispered, "Look, do you see that?" Pointing with his fingers ahead. My father turned, and he says he could see something lurking behind a tree. It looked like a person, but they were sure it wasn't an animal. My father and his colleague approached slowly and then turned on their flashlights. He says that when they illuminated that tree, they could see an old lady peeking out with only her head and one hand holding onto the tree for support. She was an elderly lady with gray hair and very dirty, long nails. My father shouted for her to come out with her hands up, but the woman ignored him. The other soldiers who were also on guard began to approach. Upon hearing what was happening, everyone got into an attack position. Clearly, they wouldn't do anything to her, but it was protocol to be ready for anything. My father's other colleague stepped forward to try to talk to the woman, repeating the same commands they had given her, that she had to come out with her hands up and that she couldn't be there. But suddenly, that old lady started laughing with her almost brown, dirty teeth. My father says he felt fear, but a different kind of fear, as if what they were facing couldn't be fought with weapons. My father's colleague got too close to the woman, but when he was about to reach her, she started running on all fours. She ran so quickly as if she were a very agile animal, while laughing out loud. My father's colleague ran after her, and he followed him. However, they were all ordered not to go, to let only the soldier who was chasing take charge, as according to his superior, it was just a crazy old woman. The hours passed and the soldier didn't come back. My father was worried because he had a good relationship with him. They had spent many vigils together, and he was the one he talked to the most. But he couldn't do anything except obey orders. The roll call came. The light was beginning to emerge, and everyone was ordered to look for the missing soldier. However, they had to be very careful and silent, as there could be criminal gangs in the area, according to the commander, who could be involved in the soldier's disappearance. They all immediately set out in groups for this search. They spent the whole day looking in different places, but found no sign of their colleague. Night fell again, and everyone needed to rest. My father, worried, couldn't sleep. It was time to rest, but he chose to stay awake in case he saw something or if his colleague suddenly returned and needed help. The hours passed and he was on guard with other colleagues. He didn't know exactly what time it was, but it was already past midnight when they heard some noises in the distance. They sounded like footsteps, as if branches were being stepped on. They alerted the entire platoon and approached slowly from where they had heard the noises. My father and another colleague were in front, with their guns ready. But before they could continue walking, they noticed a lump on the ground. My father turned on the flashlight to see, and there was the body of his colleague, who had been missing all day, with torn clothes and his face completely disfigured by deep bites. It looked like an animal had attacked him and torn pieces of his face. Everyone was shocked to see him because it's something very difficult to witness, even for a soldier. You realize that you never get used to seeing that kind of thing, and what disturbed them the most was how his face was disfigured. "This is not human," said one of my father's colleagues. While everyone tried to understand what had happened, they were ordered to look for the old lady or any other suspect in the area. But no matter how much they searched, they never found anything, anyone, or any indication that something like that had happened. There were no bloodstains from the soldier or the missing pieces from his face. It was as if that old lady had really devoured them. There were also no nearby criminal gangs or tire marks from vehicles. Nothing. What disturbed my father the most was that the old lady, or whatever it was, handed over the soldier's body and just mocked them. He believes it could have been a witch or some demon in the form of an old lady, but he's not sure. However, he is convinced that it was not a human being. Thank you very much for watching this video. I invite you to subscribe to see more scary content. Like the video and share it with your friends.